The book of 2 Kings, chapter 16. Ahaz reigns in Judah. In the 17th year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, Ahaz, the son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaz was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. And he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God, as his father David had done. But he walked in the way of the kings of Israel. He even burned his son as an offering, according to the despicable practices of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. And he sacrificed and made offerings on the high places and on the hills and under every green tree. Then Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came up to wage war on Jerusalem, and they besieged Ahaz, but could not conquer him. At that time, Rezin, the king of Syria, recovered Elath for Syria and drove the men of Judah from Elath. And the Edomites came to Elath, where they dwell to this day. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am your servant and your son. Come up and rescue me from the hand of the king of Syria and from the hand of the king of Israel, who are attacking me. Ahaz took the silver and gold that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasures of the king's house and sent a present to the king of Assyria. And the king of Assyria listened to him. The king of Assyria marched up against Damascus and took it, carrying his people captive to Kir, and he killed Rezin. When King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, he saw the altar that was at Damascus, and King Ahaz sent to Uriah the priest a model of the altar and its pattern, exact in all its details. And Uriah the priest built the altar in accordance with all that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus. So Uriah the priest made it before King Ahaz arrived from Damascus. And when the king came from Damascus, the king viewed the altar. Then the king drew near to the altar and went up on it, and burned his burnt offering and his grain offering, and poured his drink offering, and threw the blood of his peace offerings on the altar. And the bronze altar that was before the Lord he removed from the front of the house, from the place between his altar and the house of the Lord, and put it on the north side of his altar. And King Ahaz commanded Uriah the priest, saying, on the great altar burn the morning burnt offering, and the evening grain offering, and the king's burnt offering, and his grain offering, with a burnt offering of all the people of the land, and their grain offering and their drink offering, and throw on it all the blood of the burnt offering and all the blood of the sacrifice. But the bronze altar shall be for me to inquire by. Uriah the priest did all this as the king Ahaz commanded. And King Ahaz cut off the frames of the stands and removed the basin from them. And he took down the seat from off the bronze oxen that were under it and put it on a stone pedestal. And the coverway for the Sabbath that had been built inside the house and the outer entrance for the king he caused to go around the house of the Lord because of the king of Assyria. Now the rest of the acts of Ahaz that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Ahaz slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. And Hezekiah his son reigned in his place. Chapter 17. Hoshea reigns in Israel. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, Hoshea the son of Elah began to reign in Samaria over Israel, and he reigned 9 years. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, yet not as the kings of Israel who were before him. Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his vassal and paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria found treachery in Hoshea, for he has sent messengers to do so. King of Egypt, and offer no tribute to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria invaded all the land and came to Samaria, and for 3 years he besieged it. The fall of Israel. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria, and he carried the Israelites away to Assyria and placed them in Halal and on Habor, the river of Goshen, and in the cities amid these. Exile because of idolatry. And this occurred because the people of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods, and walked in the customs of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel, and in the customs that the kings of Israel had practiced. And the people of Israel did secretly against the Lord their God things that were not right. They built for themselves high places in all their towns, from watch tower to fortified city. They set up for themselves pillars and ashram on every high hill and under every green tree, and there they made offerings on all the high places, as the nations did, whom the Lord carried away before them. And they did wicked things, provoking the Lord to anger, and they served idols, of which the Lord has said to them, "You shall not do this." Yet the Lord warned Israel and Judah by every prophet and every seer, saying, "Turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes in accordance with all the law that I commanded your fathers and that I sent to you by my servants, the prophets." But they would not listen, but were stubborn, as their fathers had been, who did not believe in the Lord their God. They despised his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers and the warnings that he gave them. They went after false idols and became false, and they followed the nations that were around them, concerning who the Lord had commanded them that they should not do like them. And they abandoned all the commandments of the Lord their God and made for themselves metal images of 2 calves, and they made an Asherah and worship all the hosts of heaven and serve Baal. And they burned their sons and their daughters as offerings, and used divination and omens, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. None was left but the tribe of Judah only. Judah also did not keep the commandments of the Lord their God, but walked in the customs that Israel had introduced. And the Lord rejected all the descendants of Israel and afflicted them and gave them into the hand of plunderers until he had cast them out of his sight. When he had torn Israel from the house of David, they made Jeroboam the son of Nebat king. And Jeroboam drove Israel from following the Lord and made them commit great sin. The people of Israel walked in all the sins that Jeroboam did. They did not depart from them until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he has spoken by all his servants the prophets. So Israel was exiled from their own land to Assyria until this day. Assyria resettled Samaria, and the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the people of Israel. And they took possession of Samaria and lived in the cities. And at the beginning of their dwelling there, they did not fear the Lord. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them, which killed some of them. So the king of Assyria was told, "The nations that you have carried away and placed in the city of Samaria do not know the law of the God of the land. Therefore he has sent lions among them, and behold, they are killing them, because they do not know the law of the God of the land." Then the king of Assyria commanded, "Send there one of the priests whom you carry away from there, and let him go and dwell there, and teach them the law of the God of the land. So one of the priests whom they had carried away from Samaria came and lived in Bethel, and taught them how they should fear the Lord. But every nation still made gods of its own, and put them in the shrines of the high places that the Samaritans had made, every nation in the cities in which they lived. The men of Babylon made Succoth-Benoth, the men of Cuth made Negal, the men of Hamath made Ashima, and the Avads made Nabhaz and Tartak. And the Sepharvites burned the children in the fire to Adrammelech and Anamelech, the gods of Sepharvaim. They also feared the Lord and appointed from among themselves all sorts of people as priests of the high places, whom sacrificed for them in the shrines of the high places. So they feared the Lord, but also served their own gods, after the manner of the nations from among who they had been carried away. To this day, they do according to the former manner. They do not fear the Lord, and they do not follow the statutes or the rules or the law or the commandment that the Lord commanded that the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel. The Lord made a covenant with them and commanded them, "You shall not fear other gods or bow yourselves to them or serve them or sacrifice to them. But you shall fear the Lord, who brought you out of the land of Egypt with great power and with an outstretched arm. You shall bow yourselves to him, and to him you shall sacrifice, and the statutes and the rules and the law and the commandment that he wrote for you. You shall always be careful to do. You shall not fear other gods, and you shall not forget the covenant that I have made with you. You shall not fear other gods, but you shall fear the Lord your God, and he will deliver you out of the hand of all your enemies." However, they would not listen, but they did according to their former manner. So these nations feared the Lord and also served their carved images. Their children did likewise, and their children's children, as their fathers did, so they do to this day. Amen.
The following is the English translation of Pastor Martin Huang's teaching on 2 Kings chapter 16 to 17, translated by Ray. Read the Bible every day so you will be full of faith. So now let's read 2 Kings chapter 16 to 17. In 2 Kings chapter 16, it talks about King Ahaz, who despised the Lord. And before Ahaz, there is Azariah and Jotham, these two kings. They both did what is right in the eyes of the Lord. And for the southern kingdom of Judah, they enjoyed decades of peace and stability. But after Ahaz became king, then the entire country, the situation gets worsened, and they also experience many oppression from the other country. It's all because King Ahaz did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. So from this, we know that our God cannot be taken lightly. And so from chapter 16, verse 1 to 4, it talks about how Ahaz forsake God. So Ahaz was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. But he walked in the way of the king of Israel. He even burned his son as an offering, according to the despicable practices of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. And he sacrificed and made offerings on the high places and on the hills and under every green tree. So from this, you can see why God keep criticizing Judah for not removing the high places. Because even in the time of the revival, the good king, they served the Lord. But because these high places, these altars that was used to serve the idol was never removed, so it's very easy for the people to deviate and forsake God. So because they have all the things that is ready, so it becomes very easy for them to just worship idol right away. Because the high places was always there, it also means that that dark authority and that attraction is always there. So even after King Uzziah and Jotham, these two kings, 60 years of ruling under the guidance of the Lord, but King Ahaz, not only did he imitate them, to do what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but he acted very perversely and imitate, walk in the way of the kings of the Israel and worship Baal. And even he is the first king in the history of Judah to offer his son as an offering. So you can see that the entire nation, from the kings to the people, they are completely corrupted. So it's very hard to maintain a good example. And even the people in the future will not necessarily imitate that, but it's very easy to spread a bad example, almost like a pandemic. It spreads so fast. And so that's why in Micah chapter 1 verse 9, God says, "For wound of Samaria is incurable, and it has come to Judah, it has reached to the gate of my people, to Jerusalem." And so from verse 5 to 9, we see that King Ahaz, he relies on the other country. And in chapter 16 verse 5, it says, "Then Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came out to wage war on Jerusalem, and they besieged Ahaz, but could not conquer him." So when we are reading this history, we can read it together with Isaiah chapter 7. In Isaiah chapter 7, it says, "As Pekah became the king of Israel, he wanted to work with Rezin, the king of Syria, to defend against Assyria. But at that time, king of Judah refused to join this union." And we know, so Syria and Israel, they together want to fight Judah, and they want to banish King Ahaz, and they want to set up the son of Tabeel as king. And so in Isaiah chapter 7 verse 6, at that time when Syria, they are working with Israel together, both countries have lost their initial strength already. So they are almost on the verge of decline, but they are still able to come and fight against Jerusalem. You can see that this is actually God's discipline to King Ahaz. But God still does not allow them to destroy the house of David. So he speaks through prophets Isaiah to speak to King Ahaz, want him to return back and rely on God. So in Isaiah chapter 7 verse 3, God told Isaiah, say, "Go out to meet Ahaz and say to him, be careful, be quiet, do not fear, and do not let your heart be faint because of these two smoldering stumps of firebrand, at the fierce anger of Rezin and Syria and the sons of Remaliah." In verse 7, "Because it shall not stand and it shall not come to pass." And so you can see, even though King Ahaz, he has worshipped idol to this degree, and he even allowed his sons and daughters to go through the fires, but God, he still are willing to help him proactively. And even God invite King Ahaz to say that, "Hey, the words that I told you, they will definitely come true. So now ask a sign of the Lord your God to testify everything that I said is true." But in chapter 7 verse 12, King Ahaz, he did not believe in God to this degree that he's not even willing to ask for a sign. And he even find a very spiritual excuses, say that I will not put the Lord to the test. And so in 2 Kings chapter 16 verse 7, "So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I'm your servant and your son. Come up and rescue me from the hand of the king of Syria and from the hand of the king of Israel, who are attacking me." So do you feel very surprised when you read this? Whatever God says, every single word will come to true. But God also know that King Ahaz would not believe in his word. So God asked him to ask for a sign. But he says he will not ask, for he will not put the Lord to the test. But immediately he turned his back and go ask Assyria for help, and even tell the king of Assyria, saying that I'm your son and your servant. So in chapter 7 verse 12, even though King Ahaz has no faith at all to God, but God's redemption and salvation is not based on our faith nor our spiritual condition, but it's because of his choosing and his covenant, his mercy and grace. So even when King Ahaz refused to ask for a sign, God, he say that I will still give you a sign. And that's what is written in Isaiah chapter 7 verse 13. It says, "Hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary men, that you weary my God also?" And verse 14, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel," which means God is with us. So dear families, as I read here, I'm really touched and almost crying that even though we are so rebellious to this degree that we don't even ask for a sign, but God says, now I will still give you a sign. And this sign, I believe, it probably still don't understand that this Emmanuel will become our eternal redemption. That here God, he proactively fulfill his promises of salvation, because his grace is irresistible. And so at the same time, he asked Syria and Israel to discipline Ahaz, but at the same time, God also sent prophet Isaiah to exhort to Ahaz, ask him to return and rely on God. But King Ahaz, he still rather to seek help from Assyria and became the servant of Assyria. So what is his ending? His ending is that even though he saved himself from Syria and Israel, but now he's under the hand of Assyria. So he saved himself from one enemies, but he put himself into the hand of another enemies, which is even more cruel. So he brought himself from one difficulties to another difficulty. So dear family, this is the ending for someone who choose to rely on people but not choose to rely on God. So I don't know if you have ever experienced similar thing. I personally experienced that. I previously might thought that, oh, as long as someone is willing to help me, then maybe these things will be able to get solved by whatever. And then, but eventually, even though I solved the imminent problem, but because the solution actually brought so many other inconvenience in my life, so, and eventually I still need to deal with them. So what King Ahaz did really has to be a lesson for us, that here, not only he chose to be a vessel, but he called himself a servant and a son. And so in chapter 16, verse 8, Ahaz also took the silver and gold that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasures of the king's house and sent a present to the king of Assyria. So here, all these treasuries in God's temple in the time of King Joash, some of them was given to the king of Syria, and in the time of Amaziah, it was stolen by the northern kingdom of Israel. Now King Ahaz give away something to the king of Assyria. So you know, when God's people forsake God, then this temple, which represents God's glory, will start to suffer loss after loss. So actually, either whether or not Ahaz asked Assyria for help, Assyria is ready to set off another expansion to go and conquer Damascus because he wants to completely control this Levant region. So now when Ahaz, he brought all the things, all the monies from God's temple and also his own treasury to give to King Assyria as gift. Actually, he's increasing the power of the enemies and help him to grow faster. And so that's why in 2 Chronicles chapter 28 verse 20 it says, King of Assyria came against him and afflicted him instead of strengthening him. So may the Lord really help us not just keep asking people for help, especially when we are in an urgency. We really should not just try to solve the problem and to do something that actually sin against God or do something that displease God. We will only bring ourselves from one difficulties to another bigger difficulties. So that's why in 733 to 732 BC, Tiglath-Pileser III began his second invasion. And at that time, the northern kingdom of Israel, King Hoshea, killed Pekah and became the king. And he surrendered to Assyria. So the north part and the east part of the northern kingdom of Israel was annexed by Assyrian and became their province. So this is the first captivity of God's people. And at that time, after Assyrian dealt with all the potential allies of Damascus, the king of Assyria marched up against Damascus and took it, carrying its people captive to Kir, and he killed Rezin. And this fulfilled the prophecy from Isaiah and Amos that the Syrian will be laid captive to Kir. This is what was said by the Lord. So you can see that the rise and fall of the kingdom are all in God's hand and also in God's timing. So Ahaz doesn't have to give the things from the temple to Assyria because you know here since Rezin just died and the Syria also was destroyed, then Assyria became the greatest power in Middle East. And next, Ahaz did another thing that really sinned against God is to change the arrangement of God's temple. And so from verse 10 to 20, here in this scripture, it detailedly describes when the time of Assyria attacked Damascus and then King Ahaz, he went to welcome king of Assyria and then he see this altar in Damascus and then so he just draw it down according to the form of this altar and then send this picture to the priest Uriah. This is really kind of crazy. And then so from now on, he introduced the idol worship in Damascus and lead the people into another pit of sin. And so here from verse 10 to 11, he asked people to do it, imitate the altar what he saw in Damascus and put it in the temple in Jerusalem. And then so he is building a new altar in the temple. But you have to remember that Assyria did not force any of their tributary state to worship any specific god. But here Ahaz, he very proactively introduced the altar from Damascus to Judah. You know, he's so foolish to a degree that he chose to worship the god of Syria, and he only remembered that the Syrian used to defeat Judah, but he forgot that even the God of the Syrian was not able to protect them from the hand of Assyria, and the Syrian was defeated by Assyria. So in chapter 16, verse 12, and when the king came from Damascus, the king viewed the altar. Then the king drew near to the altar and went up on it and made offerings. So this really triggered God's anger because he is worshiping idol in God's temple. That also means that God's judgment is very imminent. So from verse 14 to 18, he even rearranged the things in the holy temple, that he changed the bronze altar that was used for the sacrifice. Previously, it is supposed to be on the east side of the God's temple, but now he moved it north to the new altar. That means the new altar has replaced the previous bronze altar. And so King Ahaz, he's using the new altar to worship the god of Damascus, but at the same time, he also used the bronze altar to inquire the Lord. So at the same time, he's worshiping idol to replace God, but he also have to pretend that he does not completely forsake the Lord, and even will say something that's very spiritual, something like, I will not put the Lord to the test, just like what we just read. And so he is still trying to inquire of the Lord. It's really horrifying that he worship idol is actually a huge rebellion, but at the same time, he is trying to pretend that he's very spiritual. And so remember, the entire format of God's temple is did it according to the tabernacle of Moses, and this tabernacle they are made and set according to God's direction. So all the arrangement in God's temple, there's actually a meaning behind it, that we are not supposed to change it by our will. And so in chapter 16, verse 17, King Ahaz cut off the frames and removed the bronze oxen. So these things are probably, he used it to make the provision to the kingdom of Assyria. And Ahaz slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the cities of David, and Hezekiah his son reigned in his place. So here we can really see what Ahaz has done. And then, well, at the same time, we see God's promises through Isaiah to the house of Judah. We can really see that the God that we are serving today, we are really so touched by his faithfulness, his mercy, and grace. So dear families, this is not a head knowledge, but it's a real thing speaking to us today. Both the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah are God's people. At the time of Jeroboam the second and the time of Uzziah, God had gave both kingdom a very stable environment. But these 40 years of prosper did not bring any transformation spiritually, but only allowed the people to be more and more content about their spiritual situation. So until the time when God has to rise up Assyria as a tool for trial and discipline, but eventually northern kingdom choose to be united with Syria to defend Assyria, and for the southern kingdom they choose to bribe Assyria. So either the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom, they are just trying to look for help from men, but none of them choose to return back to God. So in the chapter 17, we see God's judgment to the northern kingdom of Israel, and so the kingdom of Assyria laid all the Israelites captive to Assyria. And so the last king in the northern kingdom, King Hoshea, he reigned 9 years, and he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And as he is facing the kingdom of Assyria, who is growing stronger and stronger every day, and all the surrounding country was defeated, including the old enemies of northern kingdom, the Syrian, just as what prophets Isaiah has prophesied. And next, Isaiah prophesies that the next kingdom that would be destroyed is Israel. So when Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, attacked Israel, Hoshea became his vassal and paid him tribute. But when Assyria left, then Hoshea, he cannot afford that anymore, so he betrayed them and go find help from Egypt. So you can see at the end, he still don't choose to find God. Then the king of Assyria invaded all the land and came to Samaria, and for 3 years he besieged it. You know, the city of Samaria is actually very strong. So even though the king was not there, but it still took the army of Assyria for 3 years of besiege to finally captured the city. Until the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria, and he carried the Israelites away to Assyria. So all the elites in the 10 tribes of Israel, they were laid captive to the north and to the east, and they never come back again. So they are called the 10 lost tribes. And these 10 lost tribes was the tribe of Reuben, Simeon, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Ephraim, and Manasseh. So here you can see that the entire situation is really unfortunate. Even though God has given countless opportunities, and the prophets has keep calling to them countless times, and there are so many signs and wonders and miracles, but eventually no one was awakened. They still keep choosing to worship idol and ask people for help. So eventually this righteous God can only release his judgment, and through this judgment he can bring his salvation again. And in chapter 17, they explain in detail why the northern kingdom of Israel was destroyed. And the first reason is in verse 7, because the people of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of the land of Egypt. So you know God actually remembered everything. But God's people, we oftentimes will forget what God has shown us, his grace that he had shown us in the past. And the second one is that they walk in the customs of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel, and in the customs that the kings of Israel had practiced. And the third one is that they built for themselves high places. And the fourth one is in verse 10, that they set up for themselves pillars and ashram on every high hill and under every green tree. And the fifth one is that they serve the idol. That is also something that the Lord has warned them that they should not do. And the sixth one is from verse 13 to 14. It says they would not listen, but they were stubborn, and they refused to listen to all the exhortation from the prophets. And in verse 16, it's talking about their sins of idol worship, that they made for themselves metal image of 2 calves, and they made an Asherah and worshipped all the hosts of heavens and served Baal. And in verse 17, and they burned their sons and their daughters as offering and used divination and omens. And their ninth sin is in verse 22. The people of Israel walked in all the sins that Jeroboam did, and they did not depart from them. So you know, even though God kept warning Israel and his people, but they still choose to forsake God. And so in 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 23, until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had spoken by all his servants the prophets. So the northern kingdom, they first start off this idol worship, but very soon the southern kingdom of Judah follow up on that. And so you know, at the time when the book of Kings was written, the southern kingdom of Judah was already in captivity in Babylonian. And so that's why the prophets has written everything so clearly here. And because the reason why the northern kingdom was laid captive is also the same reason why the southern kingdom was laid captive later on, because the kingdom of Judah also did not obey God's commandment from the Lord, and they also choose to walk in the way of the Israels. So the kingdom of Assyria at the time of Tiglath-Pileser III, wherever he goes, he will brought the elites from the local and move them to another places. It's not just to Israel, but everywhere he goes, he will do the same thing, because he wants to reduce the chance of uprest. So later on in the time of the king of Assyrian, Sargon II, when he conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, he also brought all the Israelites to Assyria in the north, and also Medes on the east. And he also brought the Syrian from the north and the Babylonian from the east, and re-put them in the cities of Samaria to replace the Israelites. So you know, in this great moving, he moved away all the elites, but there are some people that are still there. And then when the Syrian and the Babylonian, they were moved here, then they start to dwell together with the Israelites, so they intermingle with each other in their bloodline and their faith. So you see, wherever the Assyrian go, they will just move the people here and there. And then so from verse 24 to 41, you can see that there are many different gods according to their tribes in the region of Levant. So these Gentiles that were moved to Samaria, when they see these lions coming out, they are very afraid. They thought that they probably triggered the god of Samaria, so they were very afraid. But their fear is not because they fear this only one true God, but it's this kind of fear out of their multi-deity mindset. So because they were being attacked by the lions, so the Sumerian, they asked king to send a priest to teach them how to worship the Lord. And then so that caused the intermingle of the pagan religion and the worship of the Lord. Because each tribe, they want to keep their own gods, but at the same time, they are very afraid of the Lord and they want to worship him. So that's why in chapter 17, verse 33, it says, so they fear the Lord, but also serve their own gods after the manners of the nations from among whom they had been carried away. So, for someone who is practicing idol worship, they usually don't mind to worship yet another idol. So that's why these people say at the same time, they are worshiping their own idol. They put it in the temple on the high places where they built in Samaria, but at the same time, they fear the Lord. So they also ask the priest who set the high places and to offer sacrifices in the high places of the temple of the Lord. And the only reason is because they want to bribe the God of Samaria. And so these Gentiles, they intermingle, they intermarry with the Israelites that remains. And so they become the Samaritan in the New Testament era because their bloodline and their faith was very chaotic. So that's why the Jews in New Testament era, they don't want to interact with the Samaritan. It's because of these things. But later on, we will see in Romans chapter 5, verse 20, it says, but where sin increases, grace abounded all the more. So if God allows the Israelites were laid captive to Assyria, then in Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 10, then he will be able to bring the dry bones back to life. So if God allows the Gentiles to be put in the cities of Samaria to replace the Israelites, then he's able to let the Good Samaritan to believe in Jesus in the New Testament era. And also at the time of the great outpouring of the Holy Spirit, when the disciples, they received the power and to share the gospel from Jerusalem to the whole land of Judea to Samaria to the end of the earth, from Acts chapter 1 verse 8, we can see that the Samaritans became the first group of people aside from Jews to receive the salvation. So here you can really see God's salvation. His plan is so great, and indeed everything is in his hand. He is the Lord of all, but he is willing to look after us who is so tiny and so weak, just like dust, and sometimes we're also so rebellious. But because he died for us when we were still sinners, and so even for Ahaz, whose heart was so stubborn, that God is willing to just give us a sign even without we asking it. So let's read Isaiah chapter 7 verse 14 again. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God is with us. So now today, let's spend some time to meditate on this verse, that how come God is willing to give us this salvation even when we are so rebellion against him. It's because he is so eager. He really wants to dwell with us. And everything is initiated by him. It's initiated from his covenant, from his faithfulness, from his mercy and grace. Amen.
Dear Bible Race viewers and families in Christ, thank you for watching our videos. We hope our sharing can enrich your life. If you find the content helpful, we hope you will support our ministry so we may continue to produce high-quality videos to serve the kingdom of God and hope to bless more people's lives. You can donate in the following ways. Online giving by PayPal. If you are residing in Taiwan, you may also donate by bank transfer. Thanks again for your viewing and support. Every contribution is our greatest encouragement. We sincerely appreciate your support. May God bless you abundantly. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share.
Dear families, we hope that you enjoy the Bible race as much as we do. If you are willing to volunteer to translate the original Chinese teaching into English or assist with video editing, please email service@360sunrise.com. Thank you.